The sound of screeching tires tore through the air as a flashy red sports car swerved dangerously close to Jason Statham's SUV. The driver, grinning smugly, gave Jason a mocking wave before speeding ahead, weaving recklessly through traffic. Jason's sharp eyes narrowed as he gripped the steering wheel. He had seen drivers like this before, arrogant and overconfident, always looking to provoke. Just as Jason was about to let it slide, the sports car abruptly cut him off again, this time forcing him to slam on the brakes. The other driver, clearly showing off, revved his engine and gestured for Jason to follow. A challenge. Jason's lips curved into a slight smirk. He did not want trouble, but if this driver thought he could humiliate him, he had another thing coming. Jason eased his foot onto the gas, ready to show this challenger a lesson in precision driving. Before started, I would love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying Jason Statham stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. It was a quiet afternoon, and Jason Statham was enjoying a rare moment of peace, cruising through the sunlit streets of the city. His SUV moved smoothly along the scenic route, where tall buildings gave way to tree-lined avenues. For Jason, driving was more than just a way to get from one place to another. It was about control, focus, and staying in the moment. The rhythm of the road had a calming effect, a welcome contrast to his often chaotic schedule. But the peace did not last long. Out of nowhere, a flashy red sports car roared past him, its engine growling like a lion on the hunt. The car cut dangerously close to Jason's front bumper before swerving back into its lane. Jason barely flinched, his hands steady on the wheel, but his sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the driver, a cocky young man with sunglasses perched on his head and a smug grin plastered across his face. The driver slowed down, aligning his car with Jason's, and rolled down his window to throw a mocking thumbs up before speeding ahead. Jason shook his head, brushing it off. People like that were everywhere, drivers who used their flashy cars as an extension of their egos, craving attention and validation. Jason continued driving, unfazed, until the sports car reappeared, this time darting in and out of traffic like an overgrown child playing a dangerous game of tag. Jason's patience thinned as he watched the car weave recklessly, causing other drivers to swerve or brake suddenly. When the red car cut Jason off again, forcing him to slam on his brakes, he finally understood what was happening. The driver was intentionally provoking him, pushing for a reaction. The sports car slowed down dramatically, forcing Jason to pass. As he did, the driver revved his engine and pulled up beside him, glaring at Jason before making a bold hand gesture, a clear invitation to a challenge. Jason raised an eyebrow. He had no interest in petty road games, but the other driver's persistence was hard to ignore. This was not just an obnoxious show-off. This was someone who thrived on humiliating others. Jason sighed, glancing at the empty road ahead. His instincts told him there was more to this than a simple game of cat and mouse. He was not one to back down from a challenge, especially not one that tested his precision and skill. With calm determination, Jason tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "All right," he muttered to himself, his lips curling into a faint smirk. "If you want to play, let's play." The stage was set, Jason versus the challenger. But this was not just about speed. It was about control, wits, and proving that confidence without skill could lead to trouble. The other driver had no idea what he was in for. The roar of the sports car's engine echoed through the streets as the arrogant driver sped ahead, leaving a trail of taunting revs in his wake. Jason, calm yet focused, pressed lightly on the accelerator, matching the challenger's pace. He was not about to give in to reckless speed, but he had no intention of letting this brash driver dictate the rules of the game. The sports car suddenly veered sharply, weaving between vehicles with razor-thin margins. Pedestrians gawked from the sidewalks as the flashy red car pulled off risky maneuvers, its driver waving mockingly at Jason through the window. The challenger performed a high-speed drift around a tight corner, tires screeching, clearly trying to humiliate Jason by flaunting his reckless stunts. Jason smirked, unimpressed. "Amateur," he muttered under his breath. As the sports car took off again, Jason decided it was time to remind this guy that confidence without control meant nothing. Keeping his cool, Jason executed a clean and precise turn, gliding through the same corner with an effortless grace that contrasted sharply with the other driver's showboating. The challenger glanced in his rear-view mirror and frowned. Jason was right behind him, his SUV steady and unwavering, as though it were glued to the road. The sports car's driver revved his engine again, determined to up the stakes. The chase led them to an industrial area on the outskirts of the city. Wide, empty streets gave way to the rugged terrain of a construction site. Massive cranes loomed overhead, and unfinished buildings created a maze of steel beams and narrow pathways. It was a risky detour, but the Challenger seemed intent on proving he could outmaneuver Jason anywhere. The sports car darted into the site, kicking up clouds of dust. Jason followed, his sharp eyes scanning the terrain ahead. The site was littered with obstacles, piles of debris, heavy machinery, and uneven dirt roads. It was not a place for flashy speed but for precision and adaptability, qualities Jason excelled at. The Challenger attempted a bold stunt, gunning his engine to launch off a dirt ramp and land on a higher level of the site. The car skidded precariously on the landing, but the driver managed to regain control. He grinned smugly, expecting Jason to back off. Instead, Jason calmly assessed the ramp and chose a different approach. He spotted a stack of steel planks forming a narrow makeshift bridge. With perfect timing and precision, Jason guided his SUV across the bridge, reaching the same level as the sports car without so much as a wobble. His calculated move left the Challenger stunned. Frustrated but not ready to give up, the Challenger pushed harder, navigating through a series of tight turns between concrete barriers. He scraped the side of his car on one of the barriers, but Jason breezed through the same section with millimeter-perfect precision, his SUV size and agility working in perfect harmony. As the chase continued, the construction site became a battleground of wits and skill. The Challenger tried to box Jason in by cutting him off at a narrow pathway, but Jason anticipated the move. He used the SUV's superior torque to climb a slight incline and bypass the trap entirely, rejoining the path ahead of the sports car. The Challenger's frustration boiled over. He floored the gas pedal, attempting to overtake Jason by veering dangerously close to a crane's swinging load. Jason remained unfazed, calculating the exact moment to accelerate and slip past the hazard with flawless timing. The workers at the construction site began to take notice, pausing their tasks to watch the spectacle. Some even cheered as Jason executed one daring move after another, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the Challenger's increasingly frantic attempts to maintain the upper hand. By now, it was clear to anyone watching that Jason was not just participating in the challenge. He was in complete control of it. Every move he made was deliberate and precise, showcasing not just raw skill but an understanding of the road and its challenges that the flashy driver could never match. As they neared the edge of the site, the Challenger tried one final stunt, a high-speed drift around a narrow turn lined with stacks of concrete slabs. But his impatience got the better of him. He misjudged the angle, causing his rear tire to clip one of the slabs. The car spun out, skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust. Jason pulled up beside the stalled sports car, rolling down his window with a calm expression. "Looks like you bit off more than you could chew," he said, his voice steady but firm. The Challenger banged his fist on the steering wheel, his bravado replaced by frustration. Jason gave a small nod, his point made, and drove off toward the exit of the site, leaving the flashy driver to reflect on the cost of overconfidence. The challenge was over, but the experience was far from finished. Jason knew this was not just about proving a point, it was a lesson in control, skill, and respect for the road. The sports car roared ahead, its taillights glowing like a challenge in the dimming evening light. The rival driver, his overconfidence now bordering on desperation, decided to take things to the next level. He veered toward a narrow alleyway, barely wide enough for his car, and accelerated without hesitation. It was a bold move, a gamble designed to shake Jason off his tail. Jason, observing the sudden turn, quickly calculated the angle. He knew his SUV was bulkier, but he also knew how to use every inch of space wisely. Without missing a beat, Jason followed, inch-perfect through the tight alley. The sound of his side mirrors brushing past the wall sent sparks flying, but his precision was undeniable. He exited the alley cleanly, right behind the sports car, as pedestrians along the sidewalk erupted into cheers. The rival glanced in his rearview mirror, disbelief etched across his face. "How is he still there?" he muttered, slamming the gear into overdrive. The city streets gave way to a winding mountain road, illuminated only by moonlight and sparse roadside reflectors. The sharp turns and sheer cliffs made the route perilous, but the rival driver saw it as his opportunity to gain the upper hand. He drifted through the first curve with dramatic flair, his tires screeching against the asphalt. Jason followed, but in stark contrast to the rival's flamboyant style, his approach was methodical. He downshifted to control his speed, letting his SUV glide through the curves with minimal tire loss. His calm, calculated technique left little room for error, and it quickly became clear that Jason was not just chasing, he was setting the pace. Frustrated, the rival decided to raise the stakes. He sped toward a series of hairpin turns, attempting to drift through each one in rapid succession. The moves were risky and left his car skidding dangerously close to the edge of the cliffs. At one turn, his rear wheels even kicked up a spray of loose gravel, teetering perilously over the drop before regaining traction. Jason watched carefully, not to mimic the rival's recklessness but to outmaneuver it. As the rival struggled to recover from his shaky drifts, Jason maintained his line, cutting cleanly through the turns without losing control. By the time they reached the next straightaway, Jason was once again on his tail. The rival's frustration was palpable. He spotted an old service ramp ahead, tilted precariously on a hillside. His eyes lit up with a reckless idea. He sped toward the ramp, aiming for a dramatic leap across a small ravine. It was a high-risk move, meant to show off his daring and, perhaps, finally lose Jason for good. The sports car launched into the air, the audience of startled wildlife in the ravine below witnessing the daring jump. The car landed with a bone-jarring thud on the other side, its suspension groaning under the strain. The rival driver laughed triumphantly, convinced Jason could never follow. But Jason was not one to play by someone else's rules. Instead of taking the ramp, he noticed an alternate route, a narrow dirt path winding down into the ravine and back up the other side. Without hesitation, he veered onto the path, his SUV's robust design handling the rough terrain effortlessly. As the rival struggled to regain control after his landing, Jason emerged from the other side of the ravine, his SUV pulling up alongside the sports car like it had been a walk in the park. The rival's jaw dropped as Jason gave him a small, almost casual nod. "What does it take to shake this guy?" the rival muttered, gripping his steering wheel tighter. Determined to end the chase on his terms, the rival spotted an unfinished section of the mountain road ahead. It was marked with construction barriers, but there was a gap just wide enough to fit a car. The rival decided to risk it, speeding toward the gap and threading his car through it with barely a second to spare. Jason, unflinching, assessed the situation. Rather than forcing his SUV through the same gap, he spotted a pile of construction debris forming a ramp-like incline. With a quick decision, he angled his vehicle up the incline and launched it over the barriers, landing smoothly on the other side of the construction zone. The rival, now visibly rattled, slammed his brakes to a halt on the next stretch of road. Jason, calm and composed, pulled up beside him, his SUV idling like a patient predator. The two drivers exchanged a long, tense stare. The rival finally lowered his window, his bravado drained. "Okay, you win," he admitted, his voice shaky. Jason leaned out slightly, his face calm but firm. "It was never about winning," he said. "If you're going to push people on the road, make sure you know what you're doing. This could have gone very wrong, for both of us." With that, Jason drove off into the night, leaving the rival to reflect on his recklessness. It was not just a battle of wits, it was a lesson in respect, control, and understanding the true meaning of skill. As the mountain road widened into a long stretch, Jason took the lead. For the first time during the chase, he was in control of the pace. The rival, no longer the aggressor, had become the one struggling to keep up. Ahead, Jason noticed a sign for an unfinished racetrack, a perfect place to end the chase and teach the rival a final lesson. Jason veered onto the dirt path leading to the track, his SUV handling the uneven terrain with ease. The rival followed, his sleek sports car kicking up a storm of dust as it struggled to keep its grip. The dirt road opened onto the racetrack, an unfinished loop with sections still under construction. The rival's eyes lit up. This was his playground. "You want to end this on a racetrack? You've just handed me the win," the rival muttered to himself, gripping the wheel tightly. The two cars roared onto the asphalt, their engines echoing in the empty expanse. The track was a mix of completed straightaways and half-built corners, with gaps in the barriers and loose gravel scattered around. Jason's calm focus remained unshaken as he analyzed the layout, mapping out his next moves in his mind. The rival took the lead momentarily, using the track's clean stretches to push his car to its limit. His speedometer climbed, and he glanced back in his mirror with a smirk. "Let's see you handle this, old man," he sneered, swerving sharply into the first corner. Jason followed, but his approach was different. Instead of raw speed, he relied on precision and timing. As the rival slid through the corner in a showy drift, Jason hugged the inside line, cutting through the turn with surgical accuracy. By the time they exited the corner, Jason was right back on the rival's tail, unfazed by the flashy display. The rival, frustrated by Jason's composure, decided to try something bold. Ahead was a series of sharp S-curves, with uneven pavement marking the transitions between each turn. The rival sped up, planning to drift through the entire section in one continuous motion. As he began his maneuver, the rival underestimated the loose gravel on the pavement. His car fishtailed wildly, forcing him to fight for control. Jason, observing the mistake, saw his opportunity. He slowed slightly, maintaining perfect control as he navigated the curves with a mix of calculated drifts and tight turns. By the time they exited the S-curves, Jason had gained the upper hand, overtaking the rival with ease. The rival slammed his steering wheel in frustration. "No way. How is he doing this?" Determined to reclaim his lead, the rival spotted the unfinished section of the track ahead. It was a long, sweeping corner that ended abruptly with a gap in the pavement, leading to a dirt section below. The rival decided to risk it, aiming for a high-speed jump across the gap. As the rival approached the edge, he pushed his car to maximum speed. The sports car launched into the air, the gap below yawning like a chasm. The landing was rough, his car skidding and bouncing as it hit the dirt, but he managed to stay on course. Jason, however, had a different plan. Instead of taking the jump, he noticed an alternate route, an emergency access road that cut across the gap at a lower angle. It was a longer path, but it allowed him to maintain full control. By the time the rival recovered from his shaky landing, Jason had rejoined the track, his SUV pulling up beside the sports car once again. The rival's jaw tightened as he realized Jason's strategy. Speed was not the only factor, it was about control and clever decision-making. The climax came as the track looped back toward the starting point. Ahead was the most dangerous section yet, a high-speed corner with no barriers on the outside edge. The rival, desperate to prove himself, decided to go all in. He sped into the corner at full throttle, his tires screaming as he drifted dangerously close to the edge. Jason followed, but he had a different plan. As the rival committed to his risky maneuver, Jason took the inside line, forcing the rival to adjust his trajectory. The rival panicked, overcorrecting his drift, and his car slid wide, coming to a halt just inches from the edge of the track. Jason, meanwhile, executed a flawless drift around the corner, his SUV gliding smoothly back onto the straightaway. He crossed the makeshift finish line with precision, while the rival sat frozen in his car, staring at the drop below. As Jason slowed to a stop, he stepped out of his SUV and walked over to the rival, who was still gripping his steering wheel in shock. "Sometimes it's not about speed," Jason said calmly, his tone carrying both authority and understanding. "It's about knowing when to push and when to pull back. That's what makes a real driver." The rival, humbled by the experience, nodded slowly. "You've got a point," he admitted, his earlier arrogance replaced by a newfound respect. Jason offered a small smile before heading back to his SUV. He did not need a trophy or a declaration of victory. His actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. The rival sat quietly in his car, staring at the track ahead, the adrenaline fading into a humbling realization. His earlier cockiness had evaporated, replaced by a mixture of embarrassment and awe. Jason approached him, his steps steady and composed, exuding a calm authority. "That was unreal," the rival admitted, glancing up at Jason. "I thought I had it all figured out, but you completely outclassed me." Jason leaned slightly against the car door, arms crossed, and gave a faint smile. "Speed and flash don't make you a great driver," he said. "It's about control, patience, and understanding the road ahead. A good driver doesn't need to prove anything, they let their actions speak for them." The rival nodded, his arrogance giving way to self-awareness. "I guess I've been driving more to show off than to actually learn. I've put people at risk without even thinking about it." That changes now. Jason's expression softened slightly, and he placed a hand on the car's roof. It's not too late to change. Respect the road, respect other drivers, and most importantly, respect yourself. That's how you earn real skill and real respect. The rival looked up at him with gratitude. Thank you. I'll remember that. Jason straightened, giving the young man a nod before heading back to his SUV. As the engine of his vehicle roared to life, the rival watched Jason drive off, feeling inspired to adopt a new mindset. The experience left more than just tire marks on the track. It left a lasting lesson about humility and respect, one that the rival vowed to carry forward every time he got behind the wheel. Life, much like the open road, often throws unexpected challenges our way. The key to navigating them lies not in reacting with aggression or haste, but in staying calm and composed. Jason Statham's approach to the heated road challenge is a perfect example of how keeping your cool under pressure can lead to better outcomes, not just for yourself but for others as well. His skillful and calculated handling of the situation proved that true mastery is not about showing off. It is about maintaining control and thinking ahead. By choosing strategy over bravado, Jason not only outclassed his rival but also turned a tense rivalry into an opportunity for growth and learning. In the end, whether it is on the road or in life, staying calm and focused allows us to tackle challenges with clarity, paving the way for respect, humility, and success.